Good morning, and thank you for joining us this beautiful Saturday morning, the first in the month of April, the fourth month of the year. Wow, the second quarter has started already. Well, I did tell you he would be back soon and he'd be right as rain. Yes,
Well,
he's back.
Thank
on
you.
his feet.
Thank you. I'm on my seat.
Feet, seat, all.
I'm on my seat.
Welcome back. Yes, we missed you last week.
Oh, you did?
Yes,
I didn't
yes.
get the memo.
And the cocoa. Well, I had cocoa yesterday, actually.
Cocoa?
I had cocoa.
With akara?
No, there was no akara. There was moi moi. He's back. He's back.
Well, I had cocoa this
I wasn't
morning.
like this last week. You can all attest to that.
You weren't like what?
They understand.
You
Don't
know,
worry.
I was having a conversation with a friend yesterday and was saying that you are the one making me do this thing. I said, look, the bottle of alcohol, sit down, JJ. You took the bottle of alcohol.
Opened it.
You opened it, you drank it. You now get drunk. You are now blaming the alcohol. You were drunk before. You only needed an energizer.
Welcome back.
You only needed something to...
Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Thank
Good,
you.
good,
Yes.
good. Good to see you. Nice and hale and hearty.
You know, we've said it before here that it's only natural for us to take our health for granted. When you sleep and you wake up every morning, or hyped up and ready to go, always one thing or the other to do, you feel you're good, and indeed you're good. But it's always good to listen to your body. Many of us don't even know how to do that. You have a particular favorite drink, and somehow you begin to feel odd taking that drink, but you still say to yourself, I'm going to take it because I really like it, because it's my favorite. Your body is telling you something. Listen to it. Well, that's not what happened to me. I'm just giving you counsel for those of you who...
Okay, that's not what happened to you. We believe you.
No. Trust me, that's not what happened to me. But
you.
I had a banging headache in the morning of Saturday, and I was just glad you were here to take the fall.
Thank you. Well, I'll have you know that there was no fall. So I didn't have to take any fall.
Well, you were here alone. You were home alone.
I was home alone.
Yeah.
Anyway, to our Muslim brothers, would Ramadan Kareem be in order this morning?
Oh, most certainly. And one of the things that we always say is that the lessons, of the period should last long, not just for the 30 days.
We say that at Christmas as well, and we say that at Easter as well.
And there's a good number of religious organizations that have had prayer programs in the course of the month, in the course of the year that's just started. So this one is another one. Let's make it a sustainable one for all of us.
Yes, sir. We just can't start today's program without commiserating with Nigeria, with the families that lost loved ones in that train tragedy in Kaduna. And not just that train tragedy. I mean, all through the week, there were killings in Kaduna almost every day. There were killings. First of all, what is the agenda of these people? They attack the airports, then they attack the train tracks, and they won't let you travel by road? Is it that we should not move?
I don't know, Alera, I have said this timelessly, that look, we need to have a conversation about our trajectory as a nation.
There you go again.
Yes, I won't stop talking about it because it is the soul of every business. You can't be known as a media organization and you are selling granuts. No, let's be clear about some things. What are we known for? A country, should I call it a country? UAE, such as, they decided that, okay, we don't have anything. Let's create something. So they did create a tourism. Industry in a literal desert. There was a vision.
Yeah.
So for us as a nation, what's the vision? I keep asking that question. Unless we answer that question, Alera.
Look like we ask it every week now.
We have to ask
What is our vision? Where are we going?
The reason we're asking this is 2023 beckons. We're going to employ another set of people. The question you want to ask is, what are you employing them to do?
To take Nigeria where?
Is it to rule or to govern? If it is to govern toward, in what direction, towards what achievement?
Yeah, I remember Rocha Sokorocha saying that I want to pilot this plane, or I want to be the pilot, or I want to be the driver, or something.
I don't see how
where is he driving us to?
Exactly. That same question we asked here, once before we say we want development. What are the signs of development in this country? How would you know that there is development? So no matter what any government is doing, no matter how well any government is going, so long as we can't see a trajectory, that this is the trajectory of development, we won't be able to track it. We are always praising the private sector. The private sector is doing this. They have track records. They are KPIs and all those things. What are the KPIs for the Federal Republic of Nigeria or states and all of that? So those questions are still there. And that is one of the reasons we are having these issues.
They are still there. So the question is, what is the vision of this country? What do we want to be known for as a nation? Is it technology? Is it Yahoo? Is it banditry? We need to make up our minds what we want to be known for.
Only then will we be able to employ people to do just that.
The job that is at hand.
Absolutely.
Right. We're going to start the program today by rethinking security strategies.
Well, and that, of course, will be followed by critical infrastructure development and protection.
Protection being the operative word. April 2022 worship experience.
You want to find out what that is about, as well as appeal court dismisses suit against Umahi.
Interesting, that one.
Absolutely.
And then, as is usual, we shall close with the Artist of the Week segment. And I can't even remember whether he's a he or she's a she. I think he's a he.
Okay, well, we'll find out. Okay. And don't be surprised if you find us toggle this arrangement. We do it sometimes, so anything can happen at any time.
See you in just a moment.
One that we could toggle the arrangement. It seems like it's starting early today. Well, let's begin with the April 22 worship experience, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is gearing up for its annual General Conference. To tell us more, we have three people with us. President Frederick Akimbo, Nigeria Ibadan Mission, is here with us. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, please.
That's you. Very much. Welcome. President Moses Ekpa is stake president. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
As well as President Sister Tina Udo, wife of Mission President. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Okay. Now that we have three presidents, I'm at a loss to where to start from. But let me begin with you, President Akimbo. Perhaps some perspectives would serve us well as to what this April 2022 worship experience is about.
All right. Thank you very much. The General Conference is a worldwide gathering of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And in this broadcast, it's leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints around the world will be addressing the entire world on messages that are focused on the living Christ and the gospel of Jesus Christ. So viewers are expected to, as they listen, they are expected to find the opportunity to be lifted up. They will be able to receive personal guidance and inspirations from God. They will also have the opportunity to strengthen their families as they follow the teachings of the Savior, as it will be described in the General Conference this year in April.
Okay. Well, clearly, Madam, the conference is twice a year. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Let me ask President Udo.
Sister Udo.
Sister Udo. Okay. So, what can we expect with this April General Conference?
Oh, thank you very much. General Conference is held twice in a year. first week of April and as well as first week of October.
Okay.
And in general conference, we expect the prophet and the apostles to speak to people and to teach them about Jesus Christ, and also to help them understand that as they apply these teachings in their personal life and also in their family, their personal relationship with Jesus Christ and our Heavenly Father will improve.
Well, is this only for members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
No, certainly not. We are all sons and daughters of our Father in heaven. And so everybody is invited, irrespective of your circumstances, irrespective of your religion, whatever you belong to, whatever your current situation is. We are all invited to view this conference and participate actively at this conference, because there's a solution for everyone. The Lord has called his choosing sons and daughters to speak to us and give us ways, solutions out of our problems. It will bring peace and love to families and to individuals. So all are invited to watch this conference and participate actively.
You said view, you said watch. Does
Yes.
that mean there's only online?
Oh, we're going to have, because of the pandemic, we're going to have virtual participation of this conference. A few will be at the conference venue, but most people will participate virtually. And so Channels Television is one of those platforms that is going to be used for members in Nigeria particularly to view. And so if you go to DSTV channel 420 or GoTV 48, you're going to watch this broadcast live by 5 p.m. today. And then, by 5 p.m. today, you're going to watch it live.
Okay.
And then tomorrow will continue. So people are invited to watch.
Okay. President Akimo, this has been going on for years now. Can you just share with us how this conference has affected your life specifically?
Thank you very much. I have benefited immensely as I listen always with members of my family to general conference broadcasts and proceedings. It has brought us more peace and happiness in our home, and we have felt the love of God as we continue to live the teachings and the principles taught by the living prophets and apostles in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so I invite everyone to listen, and as they listen and follow the teachings and principles that will be taught in this conference come 2nd and 3rd of April, they will also feel the love of Christ in them.
Sister Tina, your experience, how has it affected your life?
Thank you very much. Personally, I try to apply the teachings and as pertaining to the teaching of Jesus Christ and the counsels that the prophet and apostle give. I try to apply them in my personal life, and as I do so, I experience a great change in my life. And I also experience that my ability to hear him increases in my life and even in my family. And I also want to testify that everyone that will make effort to listen or to view this conference, general conference, will also have the same testimony. They will feel that love of Christ in their life, and their relationship with our Heavenly Father and His Son, Jesus Christ, will improve.
President Akwa?
Yes, for me, there's always a pre-conference preparation and then the post-conference experience. We have, my family and I, we have done a lot in preparing for this conference. And pre-conference preparation has opened my eye to pray, to seek God guidance on what you want me to learn at this conference or you want me to take home. And then the solutions he has for me, that we've done as a family. Now, in past conferences, there's a particular conference when I have experience with my children where we were teaching about integrity and all that. And I remember that as little as a child asking you to get biscuit for him, and you say, okay, I will get. And then you come back home without getting the biscuit. The child will tell you, Dad, what are the biscuit? It means that you have lost the integrity. And so with the messages that I receive from the conference, I get to change that habit. When I promise a child I'm going to get you a biscuit, I should get you a biscuit. So these are the little things that we build in our family. Teach the child honesty, teach the child integrity, and these are what conferences can do for you. And we have a family that is properly taught. We have a society that is better.
You said, my apologies,
Yeah.
Alero. You said pre-conference preparation.
Yeah.
Since people will be watching this evening, how do you advise that they prepare?
Is to prayerfully seek the presence of God, as that whatever the challenges in life is, that the Lord will use those He has chosen to speak to us at this conference with the messages of the conferences to provide solution to their concerns. You know, we need peace in our society, we need joy in our society, we need harmony in our society, we need people of integrity in our society. And so the messages of the conference will bring all of this to bear. So we need people to prepare prayerfully and allow that time, allocate that time without looking for something else. That within those 2 hours, you are paying attention that the Lord will speak to you through His servants.
President Akimbo, what will the focus be mainly this year? Well,
Wow.
this April conference. Because you're going to have another one in October.
Sure.
So I cannot say this year. This April conference.
Well, the focus will be mainly encouraging the members of the church and the world at large to learn how to hear the Lord. Because if we hear the Lord, we will feel more peace, we'll have hope, and we'll have joy, not only in our personal lives, we will also experience this in our families, and so also in our community. So our invitation to the entire people all over the world is that we are inviting them to join us in feeling the love of God in their own lives.
No, so when it's a loveless environment, so to speak, we all live in this world, but sometimes it is really difficult to speak that love language. Let me ask you, Sister Tina, sometimes it's really difficult to do some things that you hear in that kind of space, especially maybe as a parent or as a spouse or even as a co-worker in an environment. Giving love is sometimes really difficult, even though that is what is advised. What are the expectations that people should have of being able to overcome that challenge in this conference?
Thank you very much. In John chapter 3, verse 16, it says, "For God so loved the world, and He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life." We can see that love is the key word there. So when we attend general conferences, we are taught how to love. And we listen to testimonies of the prophet and the apostles. And by their example too, we are able to imbibe that culture or attitude of loving others. We are taught to love our neighbors despite their background, their circumstances, despite who they may be. We are taught to love. And as we try to apply these teachings in our lives, we find it very easy to love others. Personally, we find it easy to share the love of Christ with everyone.
President Ekwa, how easy or difficult can it be to love some people? I'm emphasizing that love thing because, I mean, you all have spoken more and more and more about that love. So sometimes, do you agree that it can be a job of work to love? And how does this conference help to address that?
I think that's the whole essence of the conference, because we know that some of these things, some of these virtues are not easy to come by. And that's the whole essence of the conference. You have it in 6 months, and in another 6 months, there's another. The essence is to keep reminding people that this is the way to go. The Savior himself talks about love. He is an epitome of love. He shows that, he demonstrated that while in his earthly ministry. And so for every one of us who proclaim to follow the Savior, we must have those virtue and attributes that he does have. And so if we demonstrate them, of course, that brings, once it is part of you, it just comes natural. You don't need to be difficult anymore. So it has to be part of you. Something you have to practice. Yeah, we understand sometimes it could be very difficult. But it's something you need to start with a step. you keep practicing it and keep loving. You need to love yourself first, of course. You need to treat yourself well so you can treat others like you treat yourself, like the scripture said. And so if we start treating people the way we treat ourselves, the Lord has just begun. And we just keep extending it. We just keep doing it. But we can't do that without seeking for heaven's help. So keep praying that Heavenly Father should help us to keep sustaining that love, as difficult as it sounds, as difficult as it is, so that we can continue to proclaim that gospel of love and then extend it to others and invite others to also join.
President Akimo, I think that little oases, if there is such a word, but I'm sure you get what I'm trying to say. Little oases of love will do a lot for us in our country today. This conference is taking place today, and another one will take place in October. And the focus of this one seems to be love, which seems to be a rare commodity in Nigeria today. How much impact are you hoping that this will have on our country, especially at this time when so much is happening that certainly do not speak of love?
Well, the conference, it's happening today and tomorrow. And that's April 2nd and 3rd. One of the things this will do for Nigerians and people all over the world who will hearken to our invitation to listen and view this conference broadcast is that as they live the principles, noted that it's difficult, as my brother earlier said, but as we live the principles that will be taught by living prophets and apostles of God in this conference, we will begin to see a change in our personal life. We'll begin to see a change in our families. We'll begin to see a change in our communities. Now, if that happens, think about what the multiplying effect will look like, obviously in our state and obviously in our country.
Let me quickly follow up on that. President Ekpa the other time talked about pre-conference preparation. Because we want at least an adjustment, a mental adjustment, a paradigm shift from the time that they listen, which they will begin to express as time goes on. What are the things that you can say, maybe from experience or from things that you have heard, people you may have counseled? What are the things that make it difficult to love? Either to love yourself, to love other people, that people need to prepare towards the conference?
Well, one of the things I would say is if we learn to tune ourselves to the Lord, if we learn to hear Him more, if we learn to emulate His example, if we learn to live the way the Savior lived while He was on earth, if we learn to follow Him continually, this will change our attitude. Okay. It will help us a whole lot. And that means that we need to get connected with the Spirit of the Lord, who will then help us with all that is required to be able to exercise this love truly to one another. And, as we love one another, we are truly showing our love for our Heavenly Father and His Son, Jesus Christ.
Okay. Sister Tina, what would you say to those who say that there is too much God in our conversation these days? We speak God, we speak Jesus Christ, but we do not do His will. What we say seems to be an antithesis of what we do. We speak God, but we do not do God.
Well, that's the reason why we are inviting all to participate in this general conference. Because sometimes it is, people find it difficult to preach Christ, but do not really act Christ. In the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we are taught to preach Christ and to act Christ because of the messages we listen to from the prophets and from the apostles, and as well as other general authorities of the church, we are taught by words, not only by words, but by example, how to love and how to live our life in such a way that we can hear him. Because definitely, when we hear him, we will be able to do that which is right. Even when the whole society feel that it is wrong, but that which is right is right. And when we have that ability to hear him, we will be able to act right, even though the society may look at it as if it is something that is difficult to do.
Okay.
That part about hearing him is a bit confusing, because sometimes you hear all kinds of things in your head, but you don't know exactly who is speaking to you.
For which reason you have to be at the general conference. Well, let me ask President Epa, how do people take advantage of this? Get a part of it? What more information? Is there a website or something? Okay, yes. I see your website is already on the screen.
Okay.
That's correct. Good enough. There are many platforms you can take advantage of. One of it is Channels Television. We've mentioned earlier on that by 5 p.m. today, we invite everyone to join this conference and watch and participate at this conference. And so you can watch this conference today and also watch it tomorrow on this platform and go to our website, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.org. www.thechurchofjesuschrist.org. You have the website, and then you can access every information about the church. And then you can also meet our missionaries. You may be seeing the young men and women on tag. Those are missionaries of the church. They are available to also talk to you about the Savior and about the gospel of Jesus Christ. And like we said at this conference, the Lord has called his prophet and apostle to speak to us. So ours is to prepare ourselves to hear him. And as he speaks to us, we do exactly what he asks us to do.
Is there a registration process?
No.
Okay.
Absolutely no.
I just wanted to be sure. President Moses Ekpa, Stake President, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
President Frederick Akimbo, Nigeria Ibadan Mission, thank you so much.
Thank you,
as well as Sister Tina Udo, wife of Mission President. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you for having us.
So, Sunrise is back after now with another issue. Please stay with us. In some interesting sense, that song actually speaks to the topic, essentially asking God to come and fight for us.
Big time. Not just fight for us, big time. We need it. Well, it was a somber evening on Monday following the attack on the train conveying passengers from Abuja to Kaduna. You will recall that the tracks were bombed on Monday, and people were killed, people were injured, people were abducted. And you begin to wonder what is going on. If you juxtapose this beside the earlier attack, I think it was last weekend, when the airport in Kaduna as well was attacked and the plane was prevented from taking off. Questions begin to just play on your mind. So, are our security agents overwhelmed by all this that's going on? Well, we'll be asking the experts this morning, and we have two of them with us, security experts. Otumba Comrade Oladende Ario is here with us in our studio in Lagos. Good morning.
Good morning, my sister.
Comrade. And Pastor Laddie Thompson joins us via Zoom from Canada. Hello, Pastor Laddie. When are you coming back?
Well, when I conclude my assignment here, I'll be back shortly. But it's lovely to hear you.
Thank you very much for joining us. So, Comrade, what do you think this is all about? Airport, rail tracks, and you can't even venture going by road. What do you think all this focus on transportation is all about?
Well, Kaduna used to represent the home of our military prowess. We had the NDA there, we had the mechanized division there, several other security-related organizations were in Kaduna. And then when you think of Kaduna in the 60s, 70s, 80s, it was the safest place you could be. But suddenly, the narrative started changing to the point that when I heard on Sunday that the airport was attacked, I wasn't surprised. Because NDA, our premier military training institution, was so violated last year. So if that could happen, and then I don't think there's anybody that is serving term now for that. There was no foreclosure, no conclusion. So, I mean, if anything that happens again, I won't be surprised. It's the same crowd that's still on the prowl. Now, Sunday happened, planes were stopped from flying, and of course, from landing too. And then on Monday, the Abuja Kaduna rail line has become an easy pick for these criminals. The Monday event wasn't the first one. We've had several. And the thinking was that, okay, since the road was no longer safe, they could be going via the train. But repeatedly, we've experienced attacks on the train. And you would have expected government now to be purposeful in bringing up a solution. It became very painful when the Minister of Transportation came up and said he wrote a memo requesting for 3.7 billion naira, to install gadgets and all of that. But when I read the memo, from within the government, saying that the company that he put forward for that contract had a turnover of about 80 million naira, and there was no record of prior capacity where they are delivered on such a job. Now, you begin to ask yourself, what kind of characters do we have in government? Yes, well, you could have written a memo, but there was a transparency. It would have scaled through.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, lives have been lost, people have been made. I mean, the one that paid me particularly is the lady doctor that was murdered, and the lawyer too, and the TUC man. We used to roll together in Abuja in my days at the Labour office. Now they are all gone. And very painfully too, these criminals went to the first-class cabin, harvesting people and taking them into the forest. And up till now, none has been discovered. Unfortunately, the happening also reflected the level of corruption with ticketing at the NRC. And this is a project that we borrowed humongous money to finance, hoping to pay back over time. Everything summarized presents a dysfunctional society.
Well, Pastor Thompson, you've been talking about this for years. I'm almost certain that there is a perspective to this issue that we're not looking at yet.
I think you may be right. First of all, I think our hearts must go out to the families that have lost children and parents and wives and all that. Then as we do that, we want to remember again that this is just an addition to the statistics of what has been going on over more than 10, 12 years. It's just increasing. So if you ask me, at this point in time, if we want to look at the Abuja Kaduna incidents, we need to adopt the policy of tragic optimism. I've mentioned this before in a prior interview, that this should be our policy right now in Nigeria. Tragic optimism, they say, is just a search for meaning when the inevitable tragedies of life show up. And what tragic optimism does is that it doesn't allow us to be so covered with sorrow that we are useless. And it doesn't allow us, again, on the other hand, to go to the other extreme, which is to start, talking positively without any reason behind. Tragic optimism allows us at a time like this as a nation to look at the pain that we are going through and use it as an opportunity to bring forth a testimony through that. It allows us to look at the fact that a lot of guilt, people are introspecting all over the whole place. And out of this guilt, we should be able to improve as a nation. And finally, when you look at the wanton loss of lives, indiscriminate way, which is just symptomatic of the war form that is attacking us. We would also agree that this might just be an opportunity for us to become decisive enough to take the actions that we refuse to take all along. So if you ask me, the tragedy is just symptomatic. It's like a medical doctor, we've told you before, we are entering the final phases of what has come against Nigeria. And the best way we can move forward from this, if we assess it and take up tragic optimism, what I'm going to tell you now is this. We need to take decisive actions now. And I will tell you what will help us to make those decisive actions if Nigeria is to win this war. Right now, we are at 51-50, 51-49. You know, right now, before we had better chances, but the chances are dwindling as the time frame is reducing. So what should we do? I think what we need to do in Nigeria right now, looking at the security architecture, the country itself, and everybody involved, is what they call the mathematization of reality. That is, we need to mathematize our inquiries. We need to dispassionately, at this point in time right now, devoid of emotions. We need to look at the trajectory of this hydra that has been attacking Nigeria. We need to dispassionately, with digital accuracy, as it were, look at facts and figures so that we will not be confused. Now, what will this lead us to that can help us at a time like this, you know, in Nigeria? One, we've said this for more than 10, 15 years, that any person who is a professional in this field, who understands this new warfare, knows that we are dealing with a hydra, a shape-shifting hydra, a hydra that, you know, makes use of terror in a clinical way to break the will of a nation so that a minority can impose its will on a majority. We are dealing with a hydra that wears religion as a cloak. So that hydra is what has struck again. It is very intelligent. It is purposive. Now, why is Kaduna State the one that is undergoing all these things? If we are going to be very true to ourselves and we intend to win this war, we need to find the courage and the boldness. Let's take a case study of what's going on in Kaduna State right now. I think there are a few people who need to be declared as persons of interest. We know it has been proven all over the world that this hydra is opportunistic. It uses moles. It uses penetration within the structure of governance, the political structure. It's a hydra to collapse the host nation from within. And what we are meant to do is that, listen, I've listened to a lot of people talking. There's nothing wrong with Nigeria's armed forces. There's nothing wrong with our security professionals. They are very good. There's nothing wrong with our people, even though we may have the challenges of corruption and all that. What we're facing here that can be isolated based on what happened in Kaduna, the Abuja-Kaduna incident, is that we are actually dealing with moles in high places. What we're saying now is that somebody somewhere, a gang of people somewhere, are frustrating all the efforts of the president. They are frustrating all the efforts of the country. And we need to be decisive this time around to use this opportunity to insist on inquiry. Now, when I talk about persons of interest, I'll give you an example. Now, it doesn't mean that these persons are guilty. It doesn't mean that all of them are moles who are cooperating. Some, unwittingly and unknowingly, maybe even doing things that are assisting this war form, asymmetrical war and hybrid threats, assisting it to take down the nation. I'll give you an example. There's an individual in Kaduna State, for instance, who should be declared a person of interest. In 2012, he released a tweet for the whole public and who was to see. In 2016, he made a comment. Not only a comment, he openly confessed that he had been in touch with some of the terrorists, all that, in terms of pacification and so on and so forth. And then again in 2019, was it 2019 February, on a live program on a national network in Nigeria, he made many comments that were unguarded. Now, why should such persons be declared as POIs? As a person of interest, especially for a person of the kind of caliber of position that he has, opportunistic nature of this threat will seize that opportunity to escalate. Now, let's not forget something again. A while ago, the government told us that based on something that information coming from the UAE, that there were at least 96 financiers of terrorism in Nigeria. Now, we did hear that they were going to be prosecuted. We heard that their names were going to be, made public.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that came out is that one of the greatest financiers of terror lives in Kaduna State, has lived in Kaduna State, has operated from there. So we need to understand that there must be something creating a very friendly atmosphere for operations within Kaduna State.
Kaduna.
And anybody who knows Nigeria's history will know that Kaduna State in Nigeria is the timepiece of Nigeria. Whichever way Kaduna goes, right from the days of God, whichever way Kaduna goes is the way Nigeria is going to go.
Just one thing, Pastor Thompson. I'd like you to follow up on something Comrade Dario said earlier about the fact that there have been attacks on some military infrastructure such as the NDA, and so far it would seem like nothing has been done, no follow-up. It would seem, according to, as far as he is concerned, no one has been called to question on that one. Is that a sign of weakness or of vulnerability playing out in our faces?
Not necessarily. I'll tell you why. The thing about terrorism is that it's a very, very insidious war form. Insidious because you have an enemy that really doesn't have a uniform, doesn't have any standard barracks, an enemy that has no rules of engagement. And when you face that kind of enemy, your thinking has to change. So oftentimes, if your thinking does not change to match, the African proverb says when the drum beat changes, your dance pattern must change. Now, you will discover that Nigeria's responses have been changing, but the changes have been too slow. And that alone can give us the pointer that the major problem really is not incompetence. The major problem is infiltration. All hands, if you concatenate right now and put together everything that has been going on, it doesn't point to incompetence. It doesn't, let's not deceive ourselves. Nigeria's got professionals that are very efficient. So the point really is that there is a fifth columnist. There's something disabling the effort of the government from inside the government.
Is this unknown to government?
Well, that again would be a question that would be better responded to by a representation from governance.
Okay, let's leave it. Yeah. Let's leave that at that for now. Well, comrade, there are those who, I don't know. First of all, do you want to say a thing or two about what you've heard Pastor Thompson say? Because there are those who also say, whatever you want to say in response to what he said, there are those who are, also looking at the failure of intelligence as a factor of, this occurrence back to back, almost over and over again.
Well, for every game plan, security game plan, strategy or architecture, the base is intelligence gathering. Is the foundation on which whatever you may intend to do, either to forestall or to counter or to stop any insurgency at any time. The question is, this year alone, the army got over 57 billion, is it billion naira also? Okay, and consistently like that since 2019, it's been getting so much fund, a little bit of it which goes into capital and the bulk goes to recurrent. Now, if we say funding, they cannot come and claim that they are not properly funded because intelligence gathering requires funding. I'm not going to deny that. But we have hammered on this point over and over. So for me, it's we can begin to think and say, is the government complicit Otherwise, some people should have had their day in court for dereliction of duty. But it's the same song we are singing every now this thing happens. And you know, it's so bad that each time the president comes to speak, I see it as giving us what I call pro forma invoice. You know, without a naira in your pocket, you can walk into a place where they sell Rolls Royce, pretend you want to buy. They will receive you and immediately issue you with an invoice, okay? Hoping that one day you will come back. And you know that you just collecting that paper for fun. You've only had them for a game. And so, you know, it doesn't carry any weight anymore. The state officers have been asked to do this, do that, and that. We've had this over and over. And for me, you can't be doing things the same way and expect a different result. Somebody calls that insanity.
Comrade, when the bandits attacked, or terrorists, or whatever you want to call them, they headed for the first-class coach.
They're not illiterates.
Doesn't that tell you something? And that has made some people begin to think that, the chicken has come home to roost.
Right.
The high and mighty are now being attacked. So it could be a minister's turn next time. It could be
anybody's
a governor's turn. So do you think that this will now propel the government to look at this issue more seriously?
Unfortunately,
because
I don't think so.
One or two governors have gone to see these guys and taken pictures with them that went viral. Another governor came out and said they know where these people are, and yet they have not taken the war to them. Do you think these kinds of things are now going to happen because it's becoming too close for comfort?
You see, the narratives that we've been given at one time or the other, they bear common sense. There was a photograph or a video of a governor with Nigerian soldiers visiting bandits.
Yes.
And they were carrying AK-47, ill-dressed, ragtag stuff. And there was exchange of cash in that video. And we were wondering, because what they were doing, which we spoke against, was empowerment. You were empowering them, giving them more money to be able to be better armed. And we condemned it. But they said, no, it's the best option. Now, how far has that taken us? The first governor to admit that he was paying terrorists was the same El Rufai. And at that time, we didn't find it funny. At a point, when he knew that that supposed solution had failed, he stopped and he threatened he would not pay. When they were picking children from schools, he promised to leave his child in public school. Of course, the intensity became so much that he had to have a rethink. The last time he spoke, it was yesterday, he was threatening that if federal government would not do something decisive about this case, it will be going to hire foreign mercenaries. And that brings to question, are we still one united, indivisible Nigeria? Things have gotten to a point where a governor is being made to think, look, I must protect my state. It's my territory. I've been elected to protect them. And constitutionally, that is his primary responsibility. They had gone for the governor of Benue State. They had gone for another governor, but they went on a visitation to an attack place, and on their way back, Borno State, so many security men were wasted by bandits. You begin to ask yourself, how come they seem to have superior firepower
and information?
And information, because they know who goes where.
Yeah.
It goes to the question that I asked about intelligence.
Yeah, that means they spend more, or rather, they are much more committed to intelligence gathering, making their operation seamless, successful. Whereas for us, the reverse is the case. They went to the first-class cabin, they were harvesting people. Those who they saw were too weak or too old to follow them, they wasted them and took the rest away. As we said, perhaps the willpower now that is lacking for government to be more decisive and be deliberate and confront this case. We've spent a lot of Commonwealth in the last 10, 20 years or so on terrorism, which has impacted very negatively on the amount of money we now have to develop the nation. The last 2 months, everywhere all over, it's been one problem or the other. No diesel, no petrol, bad fuel, non-spec. And now darkness has also followed. So much that
System
the
failure.
people who are, the bakers are saying they will no longer be able to bake bread. Why? The cost of diesel has thrown up their cost, and people now won't be able to afford their products.
And the
Flying.
cost of flour.
Of course.
One loaf of bread is 900 naira.
Unfortunately, again, the same attacks, this insecurity, has taken the farmers out of the farms, especially those who were into wheat production. We no longer can produce enough wheat, at least to supplement the importation. Flying again has become a high-cost joke. The other day, they said Lagos to Abuja, they will be charging between 100 and 120K. I remember going to Abuja with a 5,000 naira ticket, and everything is just going out of hand. And you begin to ask yourself, do we really have a government in place?
Okay. Well, Pastor Thompson, it wasn't only the governor of Kaduna State that has said something that many people will put question marks on. The majority leader of the House of Representatives also said something almost as combustible, that Nigerians should be allowed to bear arms in self-defense. Well, the mere thought of it, scares me. I don't know what you think of that, or along with whatever other solutions that people may be adopting to protect themselves first.
Well, let's again be very, very careful, because you are dealing with a very intelligent Hydra. And when we say Hydra, it means that it has tentacles in everything from governance to justice to the military to religion. And one of the objectives it has is to turn the people against each other to facilitate its objectives. And that's why you find out that sometimes we have to be very deliberate and purposive in every decision we take if we plan to win this war, because we are at war. First of all, for the governor of Kaduna State, he needs to be declared as a person of interest, not because he's guilty, but so that there can come an understanding that there are certain positions somebody can have that will make you complicit, even unknowingly. Now, that is not to also prejudge to say that it's impossible that his hands may be found to be, in the pot, deliberately. Now, having said that, everything that Comrade has said, I think, is very, very interesting and very poignant. But the point still is this: no matter how efficient your information gathering is, this warhead, this war form, uses moles in high places from within the system. So you see, no matter how good you are, as long as you have within your ranks, you have not cleansed your stables, and these moles are practically we've allowed them to infiltrate. Don't forget that the former president of Nigeria, before the incumbent president, did say that even in his own cabinet at that time, they were already there. So if we really want to get a hold of this thing, everything happening so far shows us that we are dealing with something intelligent. Going for the first-class cabin is typical of the kind of instructions that come from ISWAP, not from Boko Haram. Don't forget that it's still a war of narratives, and that the amplification of fear across the nation is part of what they want to make all of us fight each other. They have studied all our fault lines. They're exploiting that. So if we don't want to lose, let me say something to your last comment, which we need to be very careful about. There was a time some years ago when I spoke about interagency cooperation in some of your interviews. There was a time when I spoke about defense structures, intelligence gathering and all that. Then if you remember, as time went on, I began to talk about regional structures. And after we saw the way regional structures were put up, we discovered that it was not going to work, confirming again that we have many persons of interest all over the country who are working against the country, some knowingly, some unknowingly. Now, do you believe this, that if this thing continues, we will get to a point when the only solution that the nation will have, which is what you said is a nightmare, The only last resort, if this thing goes beyond, see, there's going to come a time it's going to disrupt air travel. They're going to disrupt road travel beyond Abuja, Kaduna. I'm talking about across the entire nation. By the time they're getting to those points and to those levels, trust me, we will come to a place where the only way we'll be able to withstand this thing is to bring it down, not just the regional level now, down to the individual level. And we are now talking gun control. Because if you imagine that on that Kaduna Abuja train, if some persons there had permits and they were carrying guns, I doubt if the outcome would have been the way it is. Now, it's a nightmare to try to imagine that, but the alternative, if we are allowed to get to that point, so I guess what we need to do is this. I think we need to push it as a political point. I think the polity of the country needs to get together and begin to let the government know that in the event of these continuous breaches, in the event that we don't have the POIs, persons of interest, rooted out so that your policies can work, in that event, we will have to empower individuals, which is give gun permits to people.
Well, Pastor Thompson,
Now,
just 1 second on that one. Is it right now? It would seem like the entire security apparatus is centralized, not decentralized. Even the regional thing that you talked about, I don't know, if it wasn't also centralized, the command and control wasn't centralized. So does it in any way validate that campaign for state police? That maybe if state governments were in charge of their own security, it could, help to deal with the issue.
well, let's again keep a very clear head in thinking these things through, because we want to make sure that this is strategic, not just a political issue. Now, the point I'm trying to raise to you is this. Before we get to that point, we must first of all consider the issue that it could just be a handful of people, persons of interest, who are disabling. I mean, can you imagine you're in a home, you lock up the house, put up your securities, somebody gets up at midnight to go and open up your windows, open up your gates, disables all your security. No matter how many millions you spend, no matter how central, local, or global your security is, as long as you have moles, persons of interest within your structures, and you have not rooted them out, things will keep going south. So when it comes to regional, the political issue, I think this is how we need to play it. Strategically speaking, the political class needs to understand that if they don't wake up to what is going on in Nigeria right now, there will be no politics to participate. If this thing out to keep going on the way it's going on, there will be no politics for anybody to partake with. Therefore, the political class has to put on their thinking cap while this lasts, to realize that if the abuses of regional structure is one of the reasons why the government cannot go in that direction, they need to come up with a unified voice so that we can be assured that if we go in that direction, it will be to localize responses and to increase, the response time to this issue. But trust me, I can assure you that this is not what is going on. What is going on here is that they have had more than 15 to 18 years to put people in different places of governance and high places in business and all that. And they are the people. Why do you think we had a policy, certain policies we don't understand? Why do you think for a long time we could not call a spade a spade? Why do you think we were confusing and what were terrorism? We were confusing it with an insurgency. These are two different things. It was a war of narratives. So even before the country realized it, the war of narratives was on. The war has been going on in different sectors to try and divide, to try and make us lose faith in governance. Now, why don't we weed out that minority that are being used so that we can unify the country and win this war, as opposed to deepening the quagmire by fouling political waters. So if we stick to the fact that we have 5 existential threats, and the major one is this intelligent hydra, I believe that the nation will sit up. The late Enna Ikumu used to be a regular guest on your programs. And I remember that one or two things he said, question, when he talked about desensitization of the polity. Now, a lot of the things that he mentioned then are not even being done. And if they're being done, they are being disabled. So why don't we look at the fact that, look, let us wake up and smell the coffee. There are people disabling whatever government is doing. There are people disabling what the army is doing. There are people disabling what the security services are doing. Whoever they are, they must be weeded out, because if we don't weed them out, they will ultimately succeed.
Comrade.
Well, for me, I will never support a situation where everyone will be allowed to carry arms, as you asked earlier. Number two, the issue of state police. There was a state, I can't remember the name, they hired sportsmen for a festival. They trained them and kitted them, and then they went for the festival. When they came back, they couldn't pay them for their performances. And I asked myself, this particular state was at the forefront of requesting for state police. Can you imagine if that state had the go-ahead to hire able-bodied men and women, train them, kit them, including arming them, and then it comes for some sort of salary payment, and they could not pay? They will have unleashed unimaginable mayhem on the population. So our economy is in a situation where it can no longer accommodate state police, whether we like it or not.
Are you by any chance also saying that the state of the economy is also responsible for making our security vulnerable?
It cannot be taken to be too far from it. More jobs have been lost, more companies have closed down, meaning more people have left employment brackets. So we now have a larger army of employable, skilled, trained people who are no longer employed. Unfortunately, they must survive. When I mean survive, if it's just to eat and drink water, they need money to achieve all of that. And that's to tell you where we are now, that people are ready to do just anything to make money. I'm not talking of those who are looking for money to buy jets, or no, just to survive. And that's why you see so many people improvising, going into Yahoo rituals here and there, people getting kidnapped. I mean, organ harvesting is now a rising trade in Nigeria because people want to survive. But you see, at the end of it all, we cannot but put the blame at the feet of the federal government, because they hold all the aces, they manage our resources, they distribute as they like. That's where the power is. People are saying we should decentralize, but it's also a process. It's not an event. And in doing that, you must be very careful so that you will not end up jumping from fry pan and find yourself in the fire pot.
And Comrade Festus Akimboyewa seems to agree with you there, because he says if the road is not safe, the railway is not safe, the airport is not safe, how would Nigerians and visitors move about? These incessant terrorist attacks on helpless people is a chronic problem. The question is why the federal government is not taking drastic action to solve it. He agrees with you that it is squarely in the
Absolutely.
hands of the federal government. And they don't seem to be doing much about it.
The state governors...
the people are not feeling the much that they're doing.
The state governors...
people are being killed every day.
That was erroneously, now I would say, clothed in the garment of chief security officers. They control or command no troops. Before a state governor can instruct the commissioner of police of the state to take any action, the CP will have to refer to some AIG, DIG somewhere, and of course, the IG. Now, and time, you know, is a critical element in security.
Now, you've on the one hand, you say that there are some states that cannot afford to pay for it, and at the same time, those states are vulnerable to security. So what do we do?
Well, the federal government that still has all the aces should wake up, be more decisive as against what we have. Then we have also promoted
When you say
a no consequence environment.
When you
there.
say decisive, what do you mean?
They should rejig the intelligence gathering. That's the bedrock of security policies. If they can get it right from there, they will forestall, stop in the track, and mitigate against so many of these attacks we are getting.
What if
and whoever gets arrested should be so punished.
What if those, what do you call it, intelligence gathering, raises the questions around the POIs that Pastor Thompson talked about the other time? These people who some may think are untouchable. What happens in that regard?
The case of people of interest has been there since time immemorial. If you remember, we used to have what they called Kaduna Mafia that held so much power and were influencing appointments, political election and everything all over the country. But the way we are now, such people, whether they no longer exist or not, I don't know. But if they exist and all of these evils are still trailing us, maybe they should be questioned. I will not forget the General T.Y. Danjuma when he said there's a plan to either do ethnic cleansing or Islamize people or whatever. Whether it's right or not, I don't want to go that route. But the point is, everything that we are seeing is indicating that the government is not deliberate in tackling insecurity. Okay. And the people are becoming bolder by the day.
Pastor Thompson, Festus again says, what's the benefit of linking our phone lines to our NIN when terrorists are still calling the families of abducted people boldly without security agencies apprehending them? I'd like your comment on that.
Now, again, we are becoming more, we're getting sharper in our vision. Let me extend it like this. First of all, some years ago in Plateau State, there was a commissioner of police. There was a terrorist attack. The commissioner of police was complicit. He was found to be complicit, but he was not sacked. He later went on to become the Inspector General of Police for Nigeria. Now, imagine what one person of interest, POI, can do. So when we talk about POIs, we're not talking about Kaduna Mafia or politicians. We're talking about wolves. We're talking about people who are part of terror intelligentsia, people who are cooperating. And you see, no matter how, I'm very careful, I'm going to tell you why I'm being very careful. Until we have another form of governance, we cannot create a state of anomy by allowing the people to work contrary to government. The best course of action, listen, I have seen more than enough bloodshed directly. I've seen families suffer in that country. And I tell you something, that wisdom has still got to prevail in solving the problem if we are not going to lose completely to this minority who are outthinking us at every turn. So to that, I think what we need to establish clearly, again, is that one person of interest, I'll give you a separate example, maybe you understand what I'm saying. Even in the army in those days, the boys in the front, they would locate Boko Haram sites, installations.
Pastor Thompson, you only have 30 seconds to conclude your thoughts.
Well, okay, let me just put it like this. Now that we are thinking sharp, we need to use everything we have in Nigeria to pressure the government. Everything rises and falls with leadership. Without destabilizing the country, we must pressure the government to look into these issues of persons of interest and remove them from their positions of influence, like the one you just mentioned right now, linking our phones to terrorists, and still allowing a young man like that Pantani, who has known terrorist sites, to continue to serve in the government when our children's future and our grandchildren's future is at stake. That is my take. Until we face these issues squarely and deal with persons of interest, when they are cleared that they are not terrorists, then we can continue to have them in office.
Okay.
But to have them in office and complicit is not going to work for the future of the nation.
Pastor Laddie Thompson, a security consultant who joined us via Zoom from, well, it seems to be his base now in Vancouver. We also had in the studio Comrade Oladende Ario. Well,
When am I getting my badge?
Comrade Otumba,
Am I getting
the
my
whole
badge?
works. He was with us in our studio in Lagos. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us and sharing your insights with us this morning. Sunrise will return in just a moment. Do stay with us.
I love you, I surrender my everything forever. Say I'm willing, I'm ready. Lord, if you will help me. I love you, I surrender my everything.
Well, despite everything that is going on, we have to keep on keeping on. And that's what the next conversation is about. Critical infrastructure development and protection. Of course, it's not unknown to us that critical infrastructures are the backbone of modern interconnected economies. So the disruption of key systems and essential services such as telecommunications, energy or water supply, transportation or finance, it can cause substantial economic damage, and that's not what we want right now. If anything, we want to be stronger, not weaker. So to take a look at this topic, at least peel the lid open, we have with us Gbolahan Olajide, who is Executive Director at DMA Advisory and Management Services Limited. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Also joining us is Ikechukwu Namane, who is President, Association of Telecommunication Companies of Nigeria, ATCON. He joins us virtually. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Okay. Well, perhaps to begin, Mr. Olajide, the first question would be for people to even understand what we're talking about here. When we talk about critical infrastructure, what are the things that we are talking about here? You know, to a large extent, when we talk about infrastructure, people are looking at the hard infrastructure, roads. Rails, airports, and stuff like that. So, but we seem to be talking about something different here.
Well, infrastructure could be physical, which is those hard ones you spoke about. There's also the social infrastructure. Both of them are important. For the physical infrastructure, the impact on the economy is direct. Whatever you do in that space starts to drop into your economy. For the social ones, it's indirect. You build people, people build economy. That is what the way social infrastructure works. But both are quite essential for the economy to do well.
Well, Mr. Namani, what are we talking about here? Perhaps better understanding from a telecommunication company's perspective?
Yeah, from the telecom perspective, when we talk of infrastructure, we're talking of basically all the elements or equipment or facilities that enables the subscribers to be able to use telecom services. So these are mainly back-end equipment. So beyond what is called the subscriber device, like your phones, tablets, and the rest of it, your laptop that you use to access telecom services, at the service provider's end, we are talking of things like the switches, the routers, the physical building, the fiber optics networks, the microwave radios, the base stations, the data centers. You know, these are the core part of the network that without those things being available, no service can be rendered to the subscriber. So the subscriber would not be able to use any of the telecom service if these other core infrastructure are not in place or functioning well. So basically, the closest we see is maybe when we move along the street and we see the cell towers and the rest of them. But there are some others we don't get to see, like if fibers are laid underground, you literally don't get to see it on a day-to-day basis. But at the end of the day, these are all what makes the subscribers able to use telecom facility that is available.
Mr. Olajide, the whole world is now tending to use artificial intelligence to protect most of these things. We seem to be lagging behind in this respect, don't we? If you look at, for instance, that train tragedy,
Correct.
one would have expected that AI would have been used to protect that kind of infrastructure, particularly since we borrowed a humongous amount of money to set it up.
The security of critical infrastructure is a subset of the bigger security environment. Now, what has happened in more structured environment is that you prepare the institutional framework for making this happen. There's a legal framework, and then there's a financing framework, because those things must be funded. So if you take a legal framework, look at Australia. Australia has a law called the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act. Now, that is a legal framework. What it helps you to do is give it a focus. So you start from defining what exactly are critical infrastructure. Why should we protect them? What are the risks? So you analyze the kind of risk we're trying to protect. Then it defines how it should be protected. If you go to the institutional framework, in the US, you have the US Federal Protective Service. The duty of the US Federal Protective Service is to protect US infrastructure. You have even things like the British Transport Police in the UK. Their duty is to focus on the transport infrastructure, ensure that nothing goes wrong along that pathway. You have the Amtrak Police, who are more interested in the commercial transport side of the US. So the institutional framework must be there. In most countries, they are located either under the Ministry of Interior or what you call Home Affairs. And there are even technical committees and agencies of government whose responsibility is to focus on the protection of this critical asset. We do not have that structure. The AI that you spoke about will lean on this kind of structures. It will come. It won't stand on its own. So without those fundamental structures being in place, we are not, if you observe when this incident happened, who could you actually point at? Was it the Nigerian Railway? Was it the minister in charge of transport? We were lost because there were no direct responsibility of anybody to have managed that process. We must put in place those structures so that we can deploy AI, other forms of technology to secure our critical infrastructure. Nations are paying attention to that.
It is clear who is directly in charge of the railway system. It's the Ministry of Transportation, and the charged affairs, so to speak, of the Nigeria Railway Corporation is the Nigeria Railway Infrastructure in Nigeria is the Nigeria Railway Corporation. So even in a situation where a state like Lagos has its own metro line or whatever lines you want to call them, they still have that conversation with the state, with the Nigeria Railway Corporation to ensure that they do it right. So that one is clear. So is that saying then that there are gaps that those who are coming up with this critical infrastructure should fill in terms of protecting those infrastructure for sustainability?
There are gaps in our infrastructure protection. You spoke about the Ministry of Transportation. I've given the example of the US and the UK. When you're locating critical infrastructure protection, it is not located in those ministries. It is located in ministries that have the competence for security provision. So when you look at the Ministry of Interior being responsible in some country, Home Affairs being responsible, they're not the transport ministry in those countries.
Okay.
But because they have responsibility for internal security, it is put in their charge. Now, they will now be working hand in hand. There's a handshake with like the Ministry of Transport that you mentioned as to how these things will work out.
Okay. Well, let me ask Mr. Namani, aping some of the things that you heard Mr. Olojede talk about here now, allow me to pick on the telecom sector in this whole critical infrastructure discussion and ask you if and how vulnerable is, if that is the case, the telecom sector in Nigeria in terms of protection of critical infrastructure?
Okay, thanks. So, riding on what Mr. Bolahan just said, the truth is currently in Nigeria, the party responsible for the policies, guidelines on Nigeria critical infrastructure is actually the NSA's office. There is some policy document being developed and structure being put in place to solidify what they're already doing. I know this because we are directly involved with them in terms of the telecom sector, critical infrastructure policies and all. So the NSA's office is actually currently the one in charge of maintaining and protecting the critical infrastructure within Nigeria. So that body exists. I know some work is currently going on with respect to that. Now, on a broader scope, we need to understand that there are layers of security that needs to be looked at. Like the AI you mentioned, there are new technologies that exist. When, as you roll out new infrastructure, especially based on Internet of Things, this technology embedded in it to monitor it. But you need to understand that there's a difference between monitoring and equipment and when somebody intentionally goes to vandalize or destroy it, which is pretty much like an act of terrorism. Globally, no matter which part of the world it is, there is no infrastructure that you can protect other than somebody physically going to guard it when there is an intentional attempt to destroy it as a form of terrorist act. Globally, it's not just restricted to Nigeria. Even if you escalate to the war currently going on in Ukraine, you see that some critical infrastructure is being willfully damaged because there's a war going on in that location. So we need to understand that once it comes to vandalism and destruction of critical infrastructure, once it is a willful attempt to destroy, whatever parameters you put in place in form of AI, whatever, that is out of the window. You need to physically protect them or have policies in place to physically protect them against somebody willfully coming to damage them. In the telecom space, we see this happening a lot, sometimes both willfully and sometimes by mistake. We've seen cases where fibers have been dug up the ground doing road construction. We don't believe that when a road contractor goes and in the course of doing their work, they damage the fiber, it's a willful destruction. We just feel it's something that is done out of ignorance and lack of coordination between the agency that have awarded the contract and the contractor themselves being diligent in their work. So that is not willful, but it happens. A lot of fiber is being damaged purely due to road construction going on. But we've also seen cases of willful destruction where people intentionally identify that there is fiber on the ground, goes to dig it up because they want to sell it for financial gain. So we've also seen that going on in the telecom space where it is willful destruction for financial gain. Then we've also seen cases where it is being destroyed as a part of the general destruction of infrastructure within a community as an act of social disobedience, terrorism, or call it whatever it is. So in all these cases, telecom infrastructure is being vandalized, is being destroyed, and what we are saying and what we'll be pushing through the policy coming out from the NSA is that there should be a concerted effort, a willful effort to actually protect this using the security agencies so that it is done not by expecting the private sector, which is currently what we are doing. Each of us have some security parameters we've put in place to secure some of these assets. But sometimes you get overwhelmed. Sometimes it's not actually your core job activity as an operating company to also provide security. We are expressing the same thing with power supply. It's not the duty of a telecom service provider to be a power generating company, but we find ourselves doing the same thing because power is not readily available. So unfortunately, that is the state of the nation, and it's not sustainable because quality of service cannot be guaranteed. Cheap service cannot be guaranteed with the current status quo. So something has to be done about it.
Mr. Namani, you spoke about willful destruction and then destruction out of ignorance. I was just thinking, do you not also think that maybe our populace is not not sometimes sophisticated enough to understand the usefulness of these things? I mean, and what comes to my mind readily is the destruction of the I don't know how to describe the railings on the bridges that people go and remove at night to go and make spoons, and they have said that it's a result of poverty. Does the government not also have it? Should the government not have it as a priority to educate the populace? These things are put there for your own good. So it is also in your own interest to keep an eye on them on government's behalf.
You are very, very correct. And this is where engaging the community and making the local community feel that this infrastructure belongs to them, not necessarily to the service provider or even to the government that has implemented it. Once you feel that this belongs to you, this is for your own good, then the community has a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that these infrastructures are protected. But there's even a second layer of it, which is making it not financially viable when somebody goes to vandalize a bridge, for instance, to take some things to go and sell. If the policies are put in place where once you are caught or whoever is supposed to buy it off you realizes that this is something stolen, this is something that is not just stolen, but is actually going to lead to potential loss of life if that bridge intentionally eventually collapses over time because the foundation has been stolen away, then we all owe it as citizens to watch out for each other and not just allow those that are greedy to have their way. But beyond that, there should also be a very strong legal and regulatory process that once this happens and people are apprehended, they are used as scapegoats to show others that this is not the right way to live. But it cuts across all sectors of the economy. Remember, when somebody goes and digs up fiber to sell, somebody is buying that fiber. If there's no buyer, then there's no incentive for somebody to continue doing it. So we all have to realize that this is for common good and we all have to work together. I'm one of those that don't believe that government can fix all the problems in the country. There is also a role for the citizens and for the private sector, all working together to solve some of these problems. But you are 100% correct. There is need for more awareness, more enlightenment. But from what I know, you would always see people that just think the wrong way in every society. For that, no matter how, it's not that they're not even aware. Some of them are actually aware of what they are doing. For those kind of people, there must be policies to address it beyond educating them.
Well, Mr. Olojede, as the conversation progressed and Mr. Namani began to speak, one of the questions that came to my mind is getting the buy-in of the people. Sometimes I think it's, for instance, I try to decrypt such issues as this. I mean, you are in a corporate organization. You are employed to do a particular job. But you know that your job, your input is someone else's output, your output is someone else's input, and all of that. Do you think we've been able to persuade ourselves as a nation that our output or input as citizens is government's input or output?
I don't think we have done well with that. The sense of ownership of communities, of citizens, of the critical infrastructure that have been provided for their own use, that sense of ownership is not actually there.
What do you think made that to be? There are those who reference back in time the mass mobilization for social re-engineering and all of that, MAMSAD.
All those things worked. Some of the songs of those days, I still have it in my head. That was how intense those campaigns were. But they have all gone underground. Nobody is hearing anything from National Orientation Agency, from all those major campaigns that we had in those days. They're not there. So the citizens' awareness, the public education side of things have failed Totally. And if we don't wake up that side, the question is, how do we create those awareness that she mentioned and Namani also mentioned?
And
We
it also,
must fix those.
for me, Mr. Lojede, it also begs the question of how committed the private sector can be to PPPs if they are not sure that their investments will be protected. Mr. Namani, let me ask you that one. There are those who, I mean, how can the private sector be interested or happy to go all out and put all of their eggs into this PPP when they are not sure of protection of their investments?
This answer is very simple. Only those that truly believe in this country long term are currently investing. We've driven away a lot of potential good foreign direct investment exactly because of this problem, because the foreigners don't have the patience and they have alternative use of their funds to other countries where they feel the fund will be more secure. Even if the potential yield is higher in the country, many people are walking away from whatever that potential yield is because they just feel that it's going to be an effort in futility. So it's hurting us from all aspects of life. The citizens are actually suffering without realizing that they are suffering from this situation because a lot of foreign direct investment is not coming into the country because people are concerned that if you invest, your infrastructure or your investment is not secured, you could lose everything due to disruption of your facility, sometimes intentionally. That is even worse situation. So we are suffering from it. What we do today is that some of us that are still investing is because we feel we have no other option. We are Nigerians, there's no other place to go to. This is our country. So we have to keep investing. And we are also optimistic that status quo will not remain the same, that a time is going to come when the orientation of the population will change and things will be better. That is the only reason and the only way you will get somebody commit good resource into the country as of today. Well, we are suffering from it, and that is why I said status quo is not sustainable. The country is losing a lot because of this.
Okay, you talked about some policies coming up the other time. Are there protection mechanisms in that policy? We'll talk about the funding of the policy, but are there protection parameters in that policy for critical infrastructure?
Yes, if the national critical infrastructure policy that is being developed is actually passed into law, there is actually some protections already included in it, where any facility that is identified as critical infrastructure receives the level of protection from the government that currently does not exist today. Today, it's been left for private sector or individuals to sort out themselves and fix their problem. Now, government would, for instance, create adequate security, state finance security or government finance security around some of this. Policies would be in place to actually dictate where a critical infrastructure is about being vandalized, and then effort is taken to prevent that. But let me tell you the one that is even more important. Do you know today, some state and local governments are actually disrupting critical infrastructures from performing, especially where there is dispute about multiple taxation and the rest of it. As we're speaking today, there are some cell-site operators-based stations that has been locked up by some state government because of dispute over multiple taxation, a situation where some arm of the same government have already collected a tax and a different arm or a different unit want to collect similar tax, and the operators are saying, no, this is multiple taxation. And guess what? They will come and seal up your cell site, seal up your data centers, seal up your operating center, purely because they want to twist you to pay that levy. So, and this is where I'm talking about that there is the ones that are done ignorantly. There's one that is willful, being done by state and local government as we speak. So if we look at it from, private sector people or the citizens are ignorant, they are creating this disruption, what do you now say when it's being done by a state government or being done by a local government? We can't say they are ignorant purely because they want to increase their IGRO and they feel that if we twist the operators, if we seal up their operations, they will be forced to pay this levy which, as far as the service provider is concerned, is an illegal levy. Anything that is viewed to be legal levy is paid for by the service providers. But when it's under dispute, and then you now say, oh, the only way I can force them to pay is to go and seal up their site or twist them, by default, you are no different from the terrorists sealing up the same site. Unfortunately, I have to use such a hard word, but that is still what it is. At the end of the day, we are talking of disruption to service delivery, to efficient service delivery. Okay. So that is what we are dealing with at this time. Okay. Hopefully, when this policy comes in, state and local government will not have the right to do that because it's included in that policy that a critical infrastructure must not be disrupted from functioning, no matter the reason or the excuse being used. Well, that is one of the protection that we know is there that currently we are not benefiting from because that law has not been passed by the National Assembly.
Well, let's just hope that the tax harmonization program plan that's accommodated in the tax dialogue that recently held will accommodate some of these issues that you have raised. But Mr. Lojede, do you think in terms of inclusion on protection of critical infrastructure, do you think that angle of host communities in the Petroleum Industry Act could also help in that regard, where some of the infrastructure of the petroleum infrastructure is literally placed on as a responsibility of the host communities? It's your job to protect it. Otherwise, you may some kind of denials will come.
It has to be in the mix. Though the question will be how effective has that been, even with the oil installation that we spoke about? Mm-hmm. Oil theft has not been as high as what we currently have. Meanwhile, we have that policy in place. Law, actually. So at some point, it's possible that the people who were put in charge have also been helping themselves or compromising on the role that have been ascribed to them. And that is why we can have oil theft going up even as we commit the infrastructure to the locals. It's one of the things that we cannot afford to push aside. The communities must be involved in the protection of infrastructure passing through their communities or for which is in their environment. We cannot take it. But we cannot also focus on that alone. It's a mix of measures that will determine how effective we will get on this matter. And that is why the policy level issue is very critical. You define all this critical infrastructure, you define the risk, the various levels of risk that are there, and how you plan to mitigate each of these risks. And the solution is usually a cocktail, not a single solution.
You talked about a mix, you talked about a cocktail. What are some of the other components or ingredients in this cocktail?
Government must be actively involved. I spoke earlier about how there are dedicated agencies of government in some other parts of the world that are responsible for protecting certain infrastructure. That is government on one side. There is the community in that mix. There is the citizen, the users of this infrastructure. They have a role too. If you see something, say something. There is the technology side of things. So it's a cocktail. Everybody must play their roles. And these roles are harmonized at the level of the policy.
Mm. Well, you talked about, just 1 second, Alaram, apologies. You talked about the place of technology the other time. Just last year, the federal government advocated the use of AI in the protection of critical infrastructure across the country, stressing the need for more awareness, research, and development towards the protection of this infrastructure. So the government is saying exactly what we are saying. Who is supposed to champion this?
Government. If government need to now co-opt the private sector, then bring them in. They will respond to you. Because if we're talking of infrastructure, the primary responsibility is that of the government. If you want the private sector to even do the funding for you, they will do it, but you have to call them because the ownership resides in you. It is at your discretion that you can decide to, let me concession this to you as a private sector. So the champion is the government. Okay. Of course, at the private sector level, we can all advise, like we're doing right here now. We can advise the government, oh, this is what we think, this is what we think. But an advice remains an advice. I can decide to take it or not.
A la ex-president OBJ, you are my advisor, but nothing says I must listen to your advice. Okay. Do you think that we're deploying technology enough in this endeavor?
No, we're not. For
but
example,
the technology is mainly available.
Technology.
So why are we not availing ourselves of it?
I don't think we're committed to it that much. Maybe we're not even conscious of it. Don't forget that we're just in the act of rebuilding our infrastructure. A whole lot of infrastructure, from electricity to road to rail, have been abandoned for decades. Now we're bringing up roads projects, we're bringing up rail projects, we're thinking of doing something about electricity. So all those, they are new. But as we're coming into that space, we must also be thinking, how do we secure them? One of the main problems of modern economic system is how integrated these things are. And the visionary who is sitting at the top there must be able to see through how these things are interconnected. Otherwise, he will act in silos and without being conscious of the effect of what he's doing on several other things. This is one of the problems we have with deploying technology. The technology is there. If we want it, we can get it. But we have to be conscious of it and go for it.
Well, Mr. Namani, you both, gentlemen, have sidestepped or spoken around funding protection of infrastructure. So let's go into it. How do we fund this protection? And perhaps to add into the mix, is there a role for insurance in protection of critical infrastructure?
From the private sector side, every infrastructure you put out there, you have to insure. So we are actually currently paying insurance premium on all the infrastructure we have out there. You don't have an option because it's a given that if you don't do that and your infrastructure is damaged, then potentially you run financial loss and you may be out for a long time in terms of a service provider. So as we're speaking, we insure every infrastructure we put out there at a very high cost. The problem is when this is vandalized and those that vandalize it are caught, there is no fallback to make them pay for it, because one of the policies we've pushed out to the relevant agencies is that if you, for instance, you are awarding a road construction contract to an entity, include in that contract that they should take insurance in case they damage any of the telecom infrastructure on the road. And that way, if the contractor is careless enough to damage it, he is responsible to fix it. What happens today is that once your infrastructure, especially fiber, is damaged, because you want to quickly restore service to the subscribers, you have to go fix it yourself. Sometimes you don't even go back to the insurance you've taken on it. You have to, because it takes a long process for them to process it. So you end up actually going to pay double to restore it when it was damaged by a third party that should be held responsible. So that insurance is there. We take it up. Unfortunately, the only people that are paying for all these damages are the service providers. Now, you could say, which, if we are realistic about it, at the end of the day, this probably gets passed on to the subscribers one way or the other in terms of higher tariff. So whether we like it or not, the common man on the street is the one paying for all this. And it's unfair and it should not be so. There should be a policy and the process where those that willfully damage infrastructure are held responsible and they pay. Because once you start doing that, people will be more careful. People will be more careful. And even when it's a willful destruction and you find them and somebody knows there's a financial cost for damaging infrastructure, people will actually be more careful and think twice before they actually go to damage some of this infrastructure. So the answer is that today, the only people paying for it are those that are implementing the infrastructure. Whether this gets passed on to the end users or not is a different story. If one is to look at it, but something tells me at the end of the day, it's being passed on to the end user, but it should not be so.
Okay.
if people do the right thing, there is already a need to put more infrastructure, which is what we are talking about. Now, somebody goes out there to destroy the ones that are already put in place. So how does that make sense? We don't have the infrastructure. The ones we have that people have invested in, people are destroying it and getting away with it.
Yes.
It's not right, and it's not good for the long-term growth of the country. One other part, because I need to kind of emphasize this because that's come up a few times, which is using technology to monitor these things. Believe me, if a fiber is cut today, the technology exists to know exactly where it is cut. But the process is, by the time you go to restore it, you are restoring it at your own cost because the person that has cut it has moved on. And there's no penalty, there's no compensation, nothing happens. So the technology exists, but the problem is not identifying where there's a disruption, but what happens after the fact. Who is held responsible and how do people get compensated where critical infrastructure is damaged or vandalized? That is where the more work still needs to be done.
Mr. Lojade, don't you think that other sectors need to take a leaf from the telecom sector as regards protecting their critical infrastructure? It seems that, especially with this train tragedy, that we are closing the stables after the horses have bolted. Mm-hmm. The damage has already been done, and it is only now that we're thinking of protecting billions and billions worth of investment. Or should we be looking in the area of insurance?
Insurance will always have a role to play as far as risk management is concerned. But the two examples you gave are actually on two different sides of the coin. Telecoms is private sector driven. So when you put private sector money in a place, they want to see through their money.
They want to protect their money.
They want to protect their money. It's different from the attitude of what belongs to everybody belongs to nobody, which is what you see at the public sector side.
It's not my father's property.
It's not my father's property. So it is being able to do a bit of change of attitude in that space that could make them imbibe the private sector approach to looking at these things. At the same time, don't forget one of the constitutional clauses now has to do with the railway. And it is meant to bring in more participation of the private sector into that space. That might help a little bit because the private sector orientation and attitude is totally different from that of the public sector.
So sometimes I'm a little confused about how to approach some of these issues because, I have to admit, we're talking about something as critical infrastructure here, and it would seem like, there are all kinds of sides to the same issue that we're not looking at. But there was an issue you raised, Mr. Namani, the other time about the divergence of approach to critical infrastructure. You talked about the fact that, some agency has laid some cables, for instance, and then another agency goes and digs up the cable, maybe deliberately or otherwise. Well, we'll come to him. I understand that we lost connection with him for a bit. So that issue of dichotomy of ideas of agencies of government that are supposed to get things done, it's a problem in my head. So there is, on the one hand, some agency that has done something that the other agency does not know about, and one destroys the other's job. What kind of harmonization do you think will help to ensure that what I'm doing as an agency is known to you and we plan it together so that I don't destroy something that you have done when we are both supposed to be working for the same purpose?
Those are addressed at the levels of either the regulator. If you look at the telecom spaces, NCC. Now, the specific example Nnamani referred to had to do with taxes. He spoke about how they were being taxed twice for the same thing and how that is leading to troubles. Now, that has to be discussed at the level of the tax agencies at the state and federal level and the NCC and these telecoms operators themselves so that they can straighten it out and know what is due and what is not due. Otherwise, telecom is also referred to as an economic infrastructure. It is so critical that a state that is chasing taxes and you destroy your telecom infrastructure or you are shut out of the telecom infrastructure, you have only shot yourself in the foot. That money you're chasing will not come. In fact, your economy will decline by virtue of the fact that your entire state is shut down from telecommunications. So the parties must work together. It is the only way forward. The state must realize that you cannot cripple this guy. Crippling them, you are only crippling yourself. So it is in working together they can fashion a common cause and align their goals. The goals is mutual prosperity. The states want to prosper, but it doesn't want to kill the telecoms to do so. The telecoms want to prosper, but it shouldn't deny the state the taxes as well. How do we meet and do that? That is what the discussion is all about.
If we are to prioritize critical infrastructure, how will you prioritize it? And in what direction should we be looking at for prioritizing critical infrastructure and protection of the same? I'm asking against the backdrop of economic prosperity for the people, for the state, for the country. So if we are to prioritize, what would be your approach to it?
I will start by providing two quotes. One from the Orient, another from the West. There's a Chinese saying that says, if you want to grow rich, build a road first. Then you have FDR, it was actually, what's the name of this other guy? And what he said is, he said, America did not have good roads because it is rich. America is rich because it has good roads. These two quotations are underlying the criticality of infrastructure. Without infrastructure, you can't develop any environment. Now, what is infrastructure without security? Look at what is happening at the Kaduna axis. So we had a road, people cannot go on the road again. So people who could afford the train migrated onto the train. The train has been attacked. So the people using the train are not using the train currently. Or the number might have gone from 10 to 2. Can everybody migrate to the airlines? Even the airlines, they went to the airports, don't forget. So if there is no security, you cannot deploy infrastructure to the use it's meant to be deployed to. So you will not be able to reap the benefit that infrastructure is supposed to provide. So these two things go hand in hand. It is part of the nature of modern economic planning. As you're looking at that infrastructure, you must be looking at how do I protect it as well. That's why you see countries fashioning out laws specifically dedicated to infrastructure provision. They know they must have the infrastructure, but they also know that without the protection of the infrastructure, that infrastructure will not deliver on the promises that it holds.
Mr. Mnamani, okay, go ahead.
It seems that what you're saying is that even at the planning stage,
Correct.
the protection of the infrastructure is in the picture.
Fantastic. That is how it works.
Yeah, but that doesn't seem to be our case here. We build all this infrastructure. Okay, look at Akmongmo, for instance. I mean, for years, for decades, boys have gone to that place just as you come down Echo Bridge and dig up potholes there so that you will slow down and buy stuff from them. And nothing has happened. Nobody has been arrested for it.
People
And
lived under those bridges.
They're still doing it. And think how much it costs to repair that road all the time. So how do we get this into normal practice in our nation, that as you are planning to build an infrastructure or to construct whatever word it is that you want to use, there's also in that planning the issue of its protection?
Correct. It starts from those structures I started with. There is an institutional framework, a legal framework, a funding framework. Now, at the legal framework side of things.
Sorry, before you even go on.
Yes.
How do we get that framework into place? Are we going to lobby? Are we going to take that bill to the House? Or how do we arrive at it?
Well, if what Mr. Nnamani alluded to is already happening at the level of the NSA need to, finish this policy document and present it to the National Assembly. Let us pass it into a law. This thing would define...
That is for telecoms. What about the other areas?
Oh, okay. If that is just for telecoms, then that's unfortunate, because we need a comprehensive... What we need is infrastructure, not just telecoms. So these are the kind of things that will have defined the fact that you cannot fry puff-puff under a pom-pom bridge. It will have told you that. So the local government is not confused. There's no confusion that the local government will say, oh, you can be here, I will collect 500 naira from you every day. You can, these are all areas of confusion. So the local government was collecting rent with stuff from these guys because there is nothing that says it cannot do so. And at the end of the day, the bridge is damaged. All the rent it has collected and the one he intends to collect for the next 50 years cannot fix that bridge. So at the level of the law, will have set out exactly what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. And there is clarity on that.
So who pursues the issue of getting that into law? Who is going to work on that law?
All the parties could do that. Under our constitution, the executive can do it. So the office of the NSA, which is currently working on the communication side of things, could decide to expand what it is and make a case for this and sponsor a bill to the National Assembly. A citizen could sponsor a bill. So you or myself, I'm interested in this enough and I feel strongly about it. We can raise some funds from other interested people and sponsor a bill to the National Assembly. The National Assembly in itself can look at what is going on. I saw the way they were debating this matter in the House when it happened. Some passion went under the table. Can we translate the passion into enacting an enabling law that will help to cure most of this situation that we are finding ourselves in? Let's let the National Assembly translate that. That's what they are hired for, to make the laws.
Mr. Nnamani, let's speak to, well, I was a question I was trying to raise with you earlier based on something that you had mentioned about interagency collaboration that could help forestall willful or unwillful destruction of critical infrastructure. What would be your suggestions along that line? We've heard Mr. Olojede, you may have heard him as well, but what would be your take on how to ensure that those willful or unwillful destruction of critical infrastructure are forestalled?
The key point, just following up on the last speaker's comment, is we need to realize that actually some of our youthful people who are involved in this can actually be alternatively gainfully employed if they are properly trained, especially in ICT areas. ICT has become a very, very important area that within a 6-month window, somebody that does not know how to code, develop app, and the rest of it can be well trained that this can be something they can even handle projects from outside the country and in foreign currency while sitting in Nigeria. So there is a lot of enlightenment we are doing, trying to expose the youths to ICT training, because we feel that once people are gainfully employed or are busy with creative aspect of life, there will be less incentive for them to be involved in some of these nefarious activities. So gainful employment is key. Just to start changing the orientation of how people actually think around some of this. So that is one of the area. The second and also equally important part, which probably goes into the question you were talking about, what do we prioritize as a nation? Clearly, security is it, as was rightly said. Even if you have the roads, but nobody can fly on it because somebody is standing there with an AK-47 waiting to blow up your head. The road is as good as empty at that point in time. So security becomes also extremely essential. But you must also understand that for many years now, we've still not been able to address issue of power supply. We are looking at a time bomb that quietly, I don't know if people are aware, but this situation about the fuel, diesel, and the rest of it is a time bomb that may soon explode if it is not addressed. The fact that we still don't have very good and functional refineries, where we still have to import product that we generate in raw form into the country at a very high cost and with all the challenges involved in distribution is a challenge. So these are not something we don't know. The reality is that we can sit here and list all our problems till tomorrow. The main point now is, what is the will? How willing are the key stakeholders ready to start addressing these issues? And I do believe they can be addressed. I don't think the challenge we face today as a nation is insurmountable. I honestly don't think so. I actually think the solutions, if we have the will to address it, is much more available to us than sometimes we tend to believe. So the answer to your question is, we need to train our people, but not just train them to be aware that you should not vandalize infrastructure, but let's actually give them alternative source of income. And those sources do exist. People just need to start having a different value system and how they see life and how things need to be approached.
Mr. Namani, I would like you to tell that to the boy who is selling pure water on the bridge, who probably sells about, let's say 2,000 naira worth of pure water. And he gets an option to go and take some railings off a bridge to make some spoons, which he can sell for 5,000 naira. Of course, that will be a better option than standing on the road selling pure water, running between cars and risking his life.
The difference is that that same guy selling pure water on the bridge, the alternative for him is not really going to dig up this stuff to sell for 5,000, but within 6 months, he can actually earn 50 to 100,000 if he's trained in ICT. And that's what we are trying to do. We are trying to build more capacity, because ICT is easy to train, it's easy to learn. You know, I don't think these days you don't need to go through this traditional 4 years of training at a higher institution to be skilled in some of these technologies and skills. So we are pushing that because we feel that that is the alternative for these people. There is a better alternative, and the alternative is to be trained in not the long-term kind of training that people always think you need to go through JAM. No, because they don't have that opportunity. So there is a new paradigm shift that we all need to embrace. And for me, that is the solution. That is the easiest part for everyone.
I agree with you, Mr. Nnamani, but I just want to play devil's advocate. Remember that when Babatunde Fashola was governor in Lagos State, he tried to clear beggars and all these area boys off the streets. He had various vocational centers all over the state. They would clear them off the streets and take them there and try to teach them something. But a lot of them ran away because they didn't want to learn anything. They thought they would make more money on the street.
If that is the case, and believe me, I am all for give people the opportunity, but I'm also for, if you be given the opportunity and you choose the way of vice, then the full wrath of the law should come on you. It's as simple as that, because the truth is status quo is not sustainable. We can't have it any other way. This is not sustainable. So if people are given the chance, as you rightly said, provided all the opportunity to turn their lives around, and they still choose the ways of vice, by all means, let the law take its full course on such people. That's the only other way out of it.
We don't have enough correctional centers.
It's not as much as correctional centers per se, you know, because it's not taking people to jail and otherwise. But again, look, we have to be optimistic. We have to believe that things ultimately will change. I personally feel that people are beginning to feel the pressure of the things not moving on them much more than in the past. So you will be surprised that the area boy that was not ready to learn 10 years ago may be more amicable to it now, because he has actually seen that there may be no other option for him.
Indeed.
Well, let me step on that same conversation and back up to the Marwa government. He had the good boys and good girls. And he did a lot at the time. Before his government, there was a lot of insecurity in Lagos. There was a lot of area boys that were, to call them street urchins or whatever it is, and he did his bit to take them off of the roads, and they called them good boys and good girls, put them into vocational centers and the rest of it, and to a large extent it would seem that things kind of tapered down. Now, where I'm going with this is the sustainability of that program. Perhaps that was the challenge, because in subsequent governments before Fashola came on, it would seem like that program of the Marwa administration was not sustained, and consequently things went down. So sustainability of some of these engagements is probably an issue that we want to also consider here. Not at the policy level now, but at the execution level. So it is one thing to have policies, and of course you know that we have that replete in our environment. Let me ask you, first of all, Mr. Olojede, we've had cases in our country where there are policies, amazing policies, exceptional policies, and they have to, you mentioned one of them the other time, that the MAMSA of those days worked, but then it would seem like the child of MAMSA, the National Orientation Agency, has just gone, under and all of that. So sustainability of some of these critical infrastructure protection policies is another thing that I think you need to speak to.
Generally, we have a problem with sustainability. And that is because we tend to think, at the leadership level, we think in 4-year cycles, which is the election cycle of a particular government. And that has implications for sustainability. Until we adopt what looks more like a vision approach to leadership, in which a leader is not looking at 4 years or max 8 years if it's a fresh election, but is thinking in 20 years kind of time. I've seen visionary documents even for counties in some parts of the world in which a county sit down, call its stakeholders, and say, this is what we intend to be, where we intend to be in 10 years, in this area, in that area, in that area. And even when the guy that's championed the vision has left and another person is in place, he knows that that is what the community wants, and they go along with it. But once we think in this cycle, it doesn't work. So what we need to adopt an approach that sees further, and for which the leaders, upcoming leaders, are committed. I'll give you an example. In Lagos State, there were a lot of projects that were abandoned by the government before the current ones. And some of the stories out there was that, the guy did not like the guy before him and all of that, so anything he touches, I'm not going to touch it. And we have that in several states and even at the federal government level in certain instances. One of the things I will give to this government was the fact that it completed a lot of projects that were started before it. Most of these rails that were celebrated were not started by this administration, apart from the Lagos Ibadan. They were started by a previous administration, and they were completed. Some of the road projects were in the same manner. Even the airport terminal that was recently commissioned was not started by this administration, but it went ahead to complete it. So we need that kind of attitude to our project, to our policies, so that sustainability can be enhanced. One other thing that enhances sustainability is also the law. In certain instances, you need the law to guide the people or to force their hands to behave in certain ways. And if we need laws or amendment to existing laws to ensure that people will behave in a certain way, what are we waiting for?
So you think we can legislate sustainability?
It's not everything you can legislate, but you can legislate some aspect of it, yes. For example, I might say a project that is half done by previous administration must be assessed for viability and sustained and completed by the incoming government. I can legislate that.
Mr. Olojede, let me also add that those two governors you spoke about belonged to the same party. Just imagine if they belonged to different parties. What would have been the case?
Meanwhile, the federal government the previous federal government belonged to an opposing party from this current one, and they completed each other. So it's not really about parties, it's about leadership.
It's about leadership.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Naman, do you agree that we can or should legislate sustainability?
Absolutely, we should. We should learn from our mistakes, and our mistakes is that if it's not legislated, people by default would not want to, especially if they feel, oh, if I complete this, the previous people may take the glory. Let me start something from scratch, and then you have a lot of abandoned projects. So if you legislate it, two things happen. One is a government that comes in and you probably feel you have 4 years. You should only implement projects that you know you will complete within your tenure. Now, there are some long-term projects that you must start and expect that the next one will complete, even if it's you or not you. But at least let 80% of the projects be those ones you know you can conveniently complete, deliver on it, so that it does not become abandoned project. That is number one. That does not even need any registration. It's just people saying, hey, we want to focus on projects that we can truly complete and deliver, given the resources available to us. The second one are for long-term projects. No country truly develops based on only short-term projects. There are some projects that take upwards of 5-10 years to complete. For those ones, we need to be realistic about it. It's unfortunate, really, that we are where we are. But if there's anything which I've said over and over again, is this realization that status quo cannot continue. There's got to be a paradigm shift. We have to do things differently than we've done it in the past. If not, things are likely going to get from bad to worse, and none of us as Nigerians wish that for ourselves or for our country. So sometimes something good comes out of a bad situation. My hope and prayer is that, given the current state of hardship in the country, insecurity and everything, I can assure you neither the current government or even the opposition government is happy with the state of play, because we are all citizens, we are all going through it. No matter who you are, no matter which part of the state or the country you live in, we are all understanding that we have to change the way we do things in the country. And my hope is that this will spur in us the will to change and just try to do things right.
Mr. Namani, don't you think that legislating, what we're talking about, would be easier if we had a vision? We had all agreed this is the direction we want Nigeria to go, and this is where we want to be in the next 10, 20 years.
That is mostly possible if you have a one-party state that is guaranteed to remain in office for a long time. In a democracy like the one we have, where there is a possibility that a different party with a different agenda or policy come into play after 8 years, then it becomes much more difficult to have this kind of plan.
Perhaps then it questions, just a moment, Mr. Namani. Perhaps that questions our collective ownership of the entity called Nigeria. India is a democracy. The United States of America is a democracy. And there are quite a number of democracies like that all over the world. So I'm wondering where that position, that what you have suggested, of course I understand what you're talking about. Do we have a different kind of head?
No, I was just going to say, and that was the point I was going to get at, that at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, it depends on who is the leader at any point in time. The leader is the one that will say, hey, I want to drive this policy, and I feel it's good for my people, and I want to use everything within my authority as the leader to pull everybody along and make sure we all work in the same direction to achieve this goal. And if it's clear to everybody and everybody sees the benefit, and let's be realistic, you're never going to get 100% agreement in everything. It's not done, globally. So, but as long as most people key into that vision, most people subscribe to it and work towards it, then it is achievable as a people. But at the end, there must be a leader that pulls us and drives us in that
Mr.
direction.
Nnamani, you have just said what I was going to say, that if most Nigerians have bought into that vision and this vision is adopted, it becomes a national vision, it should not then matter which party is in power or which person is in power. This vision is a Nigerian vision. And it now behoves on that leader to just take us in that direction, take us in that same train, in that direction, to that destination which we have all chosen for ourselves.
Let me quickly add something. If you observe, Biden recently is talking about an infrastructure bill. Now, America is backward in infrastructure relative to its position some 20, 40 years ago. So there's this $1 trillion infrastructure plan. It's going to be passed into a law. He has gone into his own National Assembly to lobby both major parties and even the independent, wherever you are, to say, look, this is where we are going. So it is going to be a law. Nobody, even if he leaves tomorrow and the next president is a Republican, there is an infrastructure law that is on the table. You go with it. So there is a place of legislation in some of this thing. There's a role for legislation.
But then there's also a place for planning.
Without planning,
However, it now depends on how stricto sensu we choose to go with that law, with that plan. How many rolling plans have we had in this country that have
Vision 2000,
Vision 2020?
That's a lot recent. I think the first plan, the first national development plan that I saw dates back into the 50s. Even before the Nigeria's independence, you know. So I'm wondering where all of that is going to go. Okay, well, we're running off now, you know, about on this conversation. So, Mr. Olojede, speak to three categories now. The people, where these infrastructure are domesticated in different parts of the world. The subnational, which is the government at the state level, and the states, you know, I beg your pardon, and the federal government, both their agencies, ministries, departments that need to interface with states, that need to interface with their citizens on this infrastructure protection.
Well, the starting point is the guiding rules. What are the rules of the games? So we must get it right at the level of the institutional framework, the legal framework. The legal framework is so important because it helps with a lot of guidance on how to behave, even at the state and at the citizens level. It will tell you what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, what is an infrastructure, what is not. So when we put all of that in place, it becomes easy. The rest is now mainly in the space of citizens' education or public awareness, in which you let everybody be carried along that this is what we're doing, this is the reason we are doing it, you have a role, this is your role.
Okay. Mr. Nnamani.
Similar ways. One, as a private sector people, we've realized that there's no way we can be successful without being good or being a good relationship with the host community. This is something some of us had to learn the hard way. So that is a given, and I think from the private sector side, it's a given that you must work closely with your host community, because the moment they see what you are doing as beneficial to them, either in the area of job creation, infrastructure development in their community, most times they protect it. We've seen that a lot, and I can give testimony that the host communities sometimes do work with you once they understand you are adding value to them. So we would encourage more of that. But the only place where we still need assistance is the government at the federal, state, and local level coming down to see some of these infrastructure developers as partners in progress. For some reason, because of the challenge in raising IGROs and fund, we seem to be working at a crossroad where you're trying to bring in investment, and before you even finish deploying the infrastructure, somebody is already looking at how to extort levies and tax from you to make it more difficult. So that needs to be addressed if we are to make progress. But more importantly, even the infrastructure that has been implemented, we need to use every available resource to the state, local, and federal government to protect it. Okay. If not, we keep losing investment. If not, the infrastructure will decay sooner than it ought to be. And that's just going to lead to problem for everybody. I'm optimistic that there's a bright future. Seriously, I believe that things can only get better for this country. I just have that feeling within me. And I hope we truly are able to move forward in due course as a nation.
So help me God. Ikechukwu Nnamani, President, Association of Telecommunication Companies of Nigeria, ATCON. Thank you so much for your time this morning, as well as Gbolahan Olojede, Executive Director, DMA Advisory and Management Services Limited. Thank you so much.
Pleasure this morning.
So we're back after now to take on the home stretch. Please stay with us. Well, that's I'm not even sure, is that KC or whatever?
Okay, yeah, that's right, KC.
Yeah, well, so many things going on. We're hoping that we'll be able to get our artist of the week. I think that's why you weren't sure whether it was a he or a she or a shim.
It was shim. But I did conclude by saying it was a he.
You concluded?
Yes, I did.
So it was a he?
It was a he, yes.
So what are you trying to say?
And the he did not show up.
So what are you trying to say? I'm just asking.
You asked whether I was saying...
So what are you trying to say? That men fail? Is that what you're saying? Are you trying to say that men always fail? Are you...
Far be it from me to come to that kind of conclusion. I will not say a thing like that.
Okay, but you said that he failed to show up.
That was just a statement of fact.
So he failed.
And it's got nothing to do with the fact that he's a man.
Are you sure?
No.
You're not sure?
He's a human, he's a woman being. He's a woman, and sometimes woman beings tend not to show up.
Is there a reason for that?
Because they are womans. They are woman beings.
Female?
Woman beings.
You said woman?
Woman beings.
When did you start your broadcasting? Because I am wondering where this came from.
But we started broadcasting in the days of Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones was our Bible.
You forgive me for...
Daniel Jones and the BBC.
You forgive me for this, Alero. I just saw a tweet that mentioned us.
Oh. Oh dear.
But it was not today, it was 4 days ago.
Okay.
Says, if you be MC or comedian, I beg, mind the way you crack jokes now. Which is that for Anambra, don't reach America.
Somebody posted yesterday, very early in the morning. Please be very careful the April 1st jokes that you crack, because jokes are no longer jokes these days. So if you cracked any unsavory April 1st jokes, maybe I should have sent you that message early yesterday morning that you should be very, in fact, it's safer not to crack any jokes, I beg, forget the matter. Don't just crack any. Because number one, people are frustrated, people are angry, people are hungry. Even the most innocent jokes will be twisted. A loaf of bread is now 900 naira. Packed soft drinks, a pack of 12 used to be 1,100. I bought a pack yesterday and I screamed when they told me it was now 1,800.
Whoa.
So you can't blame people. People are hungry, they are angry. They can't afford the cheapest things they used to afford.
But it doesn't still change. Well, perhaps that's why there's a lot of evolution in people's creativity now. You said the other time that a particular musician has become a gospel musician.
Many.
Why is that?
Why don't you ask him? Why don't you ask him? Remember in those days when we were growing up, there was a song, Allah Root on bread. Awo Orie Lonje.
That's Tunji
Oyelano.
and the Benders.
That's right. And then time went on, and then bread became one of the cheapest things to eat. So it was no longer alaru. In fact, alaru tonje bread, that was all alaru could afford. But now we have gone back to the days of alaru tonje bread. With one loaf of bread at 800-900 naira, one bottle of what do they call dispenser water is now 1,000 naira.
Wow.
We can't even drink water anymore. I wonder how much a bag of pure water is now.
Well, it's there are those who will also say that challenging times such as this also call for opportunities.
Well,
you would know in management that they will say that every challenging time is an opportunity, for development, for evolution, for creativity, for all kinds of things.
You see how I'm looking at you?
Yes, I noticed.
Okay. You may choose to ignore it.
I'm ignoring. What exactly am I ignoring?
Well,
I'm ignoring the fact that Mr. and Mrs. are having.
As for Mr. and Mrs., I have given up on those two. I have given up on those two. They are so contemporary. They just mirror what is going on in homes.
Oh, God.
They are so true. It's incredible.
It's one that I remember. The Mrs. was complaining. Everybody in the party, you said it was a Christmas party or something like that, and then all the women that they came, they were just kissing you. They were kissing you.
I remember. He says, I didn't kiss them.
They were kissing me. I didn't kiss them.
They were kissing me. It was his birthday party.
It was his birthday party.
Yes.
So I didn't kiss them. They were the ones kissing me. But why do we women also do that? You want to put the man in trouble. Eh?
Which one is trouble inside?
Why they're kissing a married man? A mister.
Maybe they are they are friends of the wife. Wives of the friend. Maybe they are friends of his wife. So his wife knows that, I beg, Miss Alero kissing Ayo. What is that? Go mean nothing, John.
Until Mrs. begins to protest at home. It's Alero that was kissing me. I wasn't kissing her.
They are kissing him on the head and on the cheek. On the head and on the cheek.
On the what? On the
head.
I think you're going to another.
You will give him a peck on his head now, then you peck him on...
You said head, not head.
On the cheek.
You said head.
So nothing spoil. He's just an innocent,
Until proven guilty.
Innocent. So why would Madame worry about that?
So
Madame can't
You
worry.
should have told Mrs. that one. So when you said heat, it just reminds me of dialects.
Mrs. no got time for that kind of play. That is one that Yoruba call irekere.
Dangerous play.
Dangerous play.
You just took my mind to dialect when you said heat.
Yes.
There are a number of comedians that play on. And I think C.D. John, the late C.D. John, bless his soul, was one of those people who played with dialects a lot, But there is one I would never forget. I don't know who said it. It spoke to some of my friends, in the South. 3 of them were standing at a junction at Ojo in Ibadan. One of them 2 of them were coming from the South. They just found themselves in Ibadan. Want to buy a newspaper, this old newspaper. One of them was from Ijo or Izon. One of them was from Calabar, and the other was from, of course, the vendor. So the Ijo or Izon man said, vendor, give me Zambian. Daily champion. Give me Zambian. said his friend, they were traveling together, said, yeah, I'll be Zampion, a Yampion.
Oh. Oh.
And the vendor, Ibadoman, said, see.
See them.
I'll be Yampion, Joy is Sampion.
Sampion.
So who is correct?
Nobody.
No, well,
Nobody.
they are correct in their heads. They know exactly what they're saying. They know exactly what they're saying. And I don't know if we will ever... You're still there.
And he thought he was correcting them, right? Okay. All right.
Okay.
It's like where I come from. We can't say CH to save our lives.
Okay.
Oh, church is shush. I mean, a Shekiri man, you will always know it's shush. Yep.
Okay, I understand we have someone that can quickly talk to us for about 5 minutes before we close this morning. Koja Kazi, that's his name. He joins us. He's emergency artist. He's a stand-up comedian. I've tried to take your job, Koja. So I don't know how you segued from estate management, being a graduate from the University of Lagos, into stand-up comedy. Want to tell us about that?
Well, life happened, though. Life happened.
How it happened to you?
I had to study to get a degree for family. You know how back in the days where there was a discrimination against the arts, where people thought that those who were in the arts were layabouts and stuff. So at the time, everyone wanted to be an engineer, a lawyer, and a doctor. So you that say you want to do arts, they just look at you like this one is unserious. So there was a lot of family pressure at the time to do sciences. So I settled for sciences earlier in my life. Then, when I got into uni, I had to do something that was related to the science. And, I faced my career afterwards.
Oh, so those things you studied were not your career?
No, at all.
None of them was funny?
At all. Do you understand? I just had to do it.
Those were for mommy and daddy, right?
It wasn't funny at all. Real estate is a funny business. So real estate is tough business right now, especially these days in Nigeria where you have more agents than, prospective customers to buy properties.
And I'm almost certain you have 1 or 2 jokes on real estate.
I do.
Tell us 1 or 2.
I do. No, it's a very frustrating. I honestly feel like there's nothing real about the industry. It's fake estate. There's nothing real. There's nothing real. I swear. You see how agents just go about Lagos trying to get you to buy properties and stuff, and even though the agents can't afford like all of these properties they try to sell.
But they can afford they can afford their agency fee.
Which agency fee? During my IT days, I was under pressure to sell a property, and my boss was usually on my case. Koja, this property has to go. This property has to go. And I asked him, okay, this property that you're telling me has to go, how much is the property? He said 2.4 billion. I said, okay, this property will not go. Then he said, why? I said, if I know person will get 2.4 billion, I won't be working here with you. So, no, there's a whole lot of pressure.
Well, Koja, let me segue into something that is happening in your industry now. I just read a joke from one of your colleagues on Twitter. I didn't even pick his name, saying that, as an MC or comedian, you better be careful how you joke these days, because what started in Anambra, the slap that started in Anambra State has been exported to the US.
Yeah, to the Oscars.
Yeah.
And to one of the biggest stages. What's your take on that?
Honestly, I've always felt like, when does a joke stop being a joke? Do you understand? I feel like a joke is funny until it's about you. Do you get? And human beings, I know we're quite emotional. I think this question will linger forever. When does a joke stop being a joke? Will himself, I think he used to be a comedian from his days of doing sitcom, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I think he also tried comedy at stand-up at some point. But I think Chris is arguably the greatest to have done this job. I also think that, the production team of the academy must have gone through the script before the show day. So I feel like in the end, all of them will be all right. They will figure their thing out and it will be all right, honestly.
Yeah,
but the question that I'll continue to ask is, when does a joke stop being a joke? Is it until it's about you? If the same joke is told about someone else, would you laugh?
But
understand?
Koja,
Yeah.
someone said, these guys are comedians. They make people laugh. If you come in a yellow dress, they'll make a joke about your yellow dress. You come in a blue dress, they'll make a joke about your blue dress. So are you going to get annoyed every time a comedian says something that remotely refers to you?
Yeah. I mean, that question will continue to be asked forever, because the Oscars as an award has an age-long history of, roast, where the host of the day gets to roast all of the celebrities, nominees, and, guests alike.
Benny.
Do you understand? And, comedy as a form of art has, different branches: slapstick, dark humor, self-depreciation. I've heard where people say the best way to do comedy is just to make jest of yourself. That branch of comedy is called self-depreciation. It's like music now. It's like saying that the best way to do music is to do Afrobeat. And, probably because R&B doesn't connect to you, you feel like Afrobeat is the only way that comedy should be done. But then again, I feel like the question that will continue to be asked is, when does a joke stop being a joke? Is it until it's about you that you stop laughing? Because at the end of the day, for every joke, someone somewhere is the butt of every joke.
Well, Will also already said that, you know what, it's okay to make a joke about me, but to make a joke about my wife, of course, there's also...
I agree.
Anyway, let's make this about you now. The next 1 minute about you. Where are we finding Koja Kaze in another, 5-10 years from now?
Selling out the Madison Square Garden.
That's a fantastic vision and a good place to anchor that one. Thank you.
It's called a vision.
That's it.
He knows where he's going.
We're going to be with you all the way.
Go for it. Go for it,
We're going to be with you all the way.
I'll send you your invite on the night.
No, send a private jet with it. Thank you very much. Koja Kaze is a stand-up comedian, a graduate of estate management from the University of Lagos, and discovered his comic skills while still an undergraduate. He's performed on notable stages since his entrance into the comedy industry. Thank you, Koja, for being a part of our show this morning. And you too.
Same to you, Koja. And Koja brings to end Sunrise for this first Saturday in April. I'm Alero Idu, wishing you all the best, a happy weekend, and all what you wish yourself, and all your cocoa and cocoa.
Well, I'm almost certain that cocoa is going to be one of those things that our Muslim brothers and sisters will use to break their fasts during Ramadan. Some may use cocoa, I don't know. So have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and bye for now. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Bye.